Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today, let's take a look at what happened this past weekend at the Countdown Cup Finals. Top 4 teams, top 2 from each region, played against each other. It was a very unexpected bracket, at least for me. And yeah, so let's take a look and let's talk about what happened. The bracket that I predicted is the one you will see here. As you can see, I felt pretty good about the Fuel, and I felt very good about the Dragons. I was very wrong. As you all know, I'm sure by now, the Shanghai Dragons did win the Summer Showdown, but it was not the Dallas Fuel who they played in the finals, but the Chengdu Hunters. So let's kind of talk about each of the teams and talk about some of their games, and I'll kind of go in somewhat of order. So let's start with the team that ended in last place, the Atlanta Reign. I want to give the Atlanta Reign credit. They were far and away the best of the last place teams. You know, we look at New York from last tournament, they didn't win a single map. The Chengdu Hunters, when they played in the May Melee, I think won 2 maps. The Atlanta Reign won 4. It was a 3-2 series. Or at least they won 2 maps, but they pushed the Dallas Fuel to the edge in the lower bracket. And, you know, it just wasn't a great meta for them, and I will give the Atlanta Reign a ton of leeway for the way they performed because they still played well against Dallas. But there's kind of a lot of factors I think that really just kind of harmed this Reign team. Number one. We now know that they had a bunch of travel issues. And they had flights canceled and delayed, and so they didn't get to Hawaii until much later than they'd originally planned. So they didn't really scrim before their match with the Shanghai Dragons. And then also, like the meta in the Western region is not suited for what we're seeing right now. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on when I kind of as I'm closing out this video. But they just aren't prepared for what the APAC region likes to run with these wrecking ball compositions. You're not going to really see a ton of Western teams run wrecking ball, so it's a very different world for the Western region than it is the Eastern region, and that was really being shown off in this tournament. And so the Atlanta Reign, they struggled, but they looked the best when they played the Dallas Fuel, the other team from their region who plays these similar compositions to them. And so what it shows is, like, the Atlanta Reign aren't a bad team. They struggled against the region that has the better read on the meta. But ultimately, when they play amongst the teams in their own region, they still looked good. We didn't get this team against Chengdu, so who knows how they would have looked against them. But Shanghai was dominant over the Reign. So I don't feel bad about the Reign. I actually feel pretty good about the Reign. The fact that they made the tournament makes me feel good about them because I had some doubts about whether or not they could make it again, but they made it, and they didn't look too bad with the exception of their game against the Dragons. Third place team, of course, was the Dallas Fuel, so they will walk away with 1 additional league point, and I believe that is also something that has locked them in for the season playoffs, was getting that league point. So very interesting stuff from the Dallas Fuel. They looked okay on the first map against the Chengdu Hunters in the first round, and then they dropped the next 3, including Volskaya Industries, which they hadn't lost all season. They also struggled a bit against the Reign. It was a close series, but they walked away from that one with the win. And then they just got completely rolled by the Chengdu Hunters in the losers finals. And it once again just comes down to the thing of, the read for the meta in the Western region was just not as good as the one in the Eastern region, and that's the way it is. And I think there's also, though, some other issues, I think, with the Fuel that should be talked about, or at least we kind of recognize, and we talk about them even from the very beginning when you go back to this team when they were first formed. And I thought that Sideshow actually had a really great tweet kind of talking about this. Just when you consider the fact that at the beginning of the season, there were concerns about the Dallas Fuel and some of the flexibility on their roster. And so Sideshow had a tweet which I thought was very, very good. He just said, Truly incredible that Dallas's weaknesses have only started to be exposed 3/4 of the way into the season. For a roster which was so reasonably critiqued in the offseason for the holes in its hero pool, they have done insanely well at covering them. Got to remember that. And yes, I totally agree. Like, this is a team that you go back to the beginning of the season, and there were so many concerns. This team doesn't have a tracer. Well, Sparkles looked really good on the tracer. This team, ever since Exy retired, doesn't have a hit scan player. Pine hasn't been able to play with the roster yet. Well, they've managed pretty well so far, even without it. This team doesn't have flexibility at main tank. Well, up until the June Joust finals, it didn't matter. That they were winning anyway because they were just that good. And so I don't feel bad by the Dallas Fuel. Like, there's definitely some concern, I think. And this is the moment I would say that really kind of shows the big crack in the Dallas Fuel. And I think that the big thing to consider if you are a team in the Western region and you watched the Chengdu Hunters just dismantle the best team in the Western region. Wasn't even the Shanghai Dragons that did it. It was the second best team in the Eastern region that completely dismantled the Chengdu Hunters. If you are a team in the Western region, this is your sign. Maybe that Wrecking Ball is the hero to kind of start grinding. We obviously don't know what the hero pools are going to be for the Countdown Cup yet. So if Wrecking Ball gets banned, this whole point is mute. And I would say the Dallas Fuel once again jump up to being a favorite to win the whole season. Or at least, a favorite to win the Countdown Cup. But so long as Wrecking Ball is a hero you can play, I think it's a really good idea to start grinding it out. If you're a team like the Gladiators, or the Outlaws, or the Shock, or the Justice, or you've been punching at this upper level of the league. You've been trying to break into that top 3 in the Western region. You've been trying to get to Hawaii. You've been trying to have one of these big moments, right? This is your chance. You can see now where the meta is going. And nobody in the Western region right now is playing the Wrecking Ball. And it is showing a lot of success, right? It is very clearly and definitively the best composition you can run right now. The meta is Wrecking Ball. And if you can be the team in the Western region that takes those steps, that puts in the time and the effort to become the best Wrecking Ball team in the league, then you have a very real shot at being the team representing the Western region in Hawaii, making the finals, dethroning the Dallas Fuel as that kind of best team in the Western region. That is what I am taking away from this tournament cycle. There is a hole, a very, very, very major hole in the Western region, and it is up to one of these teams. It could be the Dallas Fuel or the Atlanta Reign. They could decide we need to grind Wrecking Ball and become the best Wrecking Ball team in the league. I don't know if Fearless has it in his wheelhouse to be one of the best Wrecking Balls in the league. His Orisa's not great. It's okay. So there's questions in my mind about whether or not he is someone who's really able to pick up these other main tank heroes that aren't the Winston and the Reinhardt. But I just think about what the Western region looks like right now, and there's a major, major, major lack of what is definitively the best composition right now. And unless Wrecking Ball gets banned in the Countdown Cup hero pools, I would expect a lot of the teams to start really working at that Wrecking Ball and trying to get a lot better at it. And trying to force that composition to be the composition that they run as they try to shoot for a Countdown Cup Finals appearance. Will it happen? I guess we'll see. I'd expect it to happen, but that's kind of my big takeaway from this weekend. The thing that I really am interested to see, because even you look at some like the mid-level teams in the Eastern region, everybody's running it, right? Like if you look at the power rankings for Wrecking Ball on the Overwatch League website, it's all Eastern region. There's barely any, if any, Western region players on there. I know like you have the top two are Fate and Gaga, and then I believe fourth might be Mono, or third. Third is Marvel. Fourth is Yakpung. The highest in the West is Mag at fifth. You have Muse at sixth. Um, and then you have Gesture at seventh, Dawn eighth, Mono ninth, Fearless 10th. So in the top five, the top half, there's one Western region main tank. So there's a very real chance that a team like the Justice or the Gladiators or the Eternal, who have shown more success with the Wrecking Ball in terms of stats, which is only tells you so much. One of those teams could really just start grinding the Wrecking Ball, getting really good at the Wrecking Ball, and becoming the best team in the region. There's a very open spot. You might not go in as the number one seed. Dallas has pretty much locked that up after with their success in even all three tournaments. But their results are getting weaker and weaker and weaker in all of the tournaments, right? They got first, they got second, they got third. They might get fourth the next one. They might not even make it. So we'll see. But I think it's interesting. I think this is the thing to really focus on going into the Countdown Cup is how many people start really playing the Wrecking Ball in the Western region. Because those teams are, of course, behind the Eastern region teams. So let's talk about the two Eastern region teams that played in the finals of the Summer Showdown. Let's start with the runner-ups, or the runners-up, Chengdu Hunters. Their path to get there was a 3-1 victory over the Dallas Fuel, a 3-2 loss to the Shanghai Dragons, a 3-0 win over the Dallas Fuel, and ultimately a 4-1 loss to the Shanghai Dragons in the finals. I thought Chengdu played very well throughout. I was very surprised originally and initially, but I did kind of expect there to be some difficulties for the Dallas Fuel in this tournament because they didn't look good against the Wrecking Ball when Shanghai ran it. We saw Fearless in his post-match interview when they played Washington basically say, if you're really good on the Wrecking Ball, it's almost impossible to win against it. And so there was definitely a chance that the Chengdu Hunters would perform this well. I didn't expect it, though, to go this well. So I really am impressed with the Chengdu Hunters. I think Late Young is a very interesting player to look at because I thought that Late Young being integrated into the roster would cause a lot more problems. I thought they wouldn't look as good as it did with Elsa. And I know some people are very, very, very high on Elsa, or were very high on Elsa. And Late Young was always kind of seen as this like Zarya one trick. But I almost feel like Late Young has a more dynamic play style. Not necessarily better, but a flashier, more kind of big play style than Elsa did. And his Zarya is much better. That's what he's really known for. And I actually really think that Late Young has brought a lot to this team in a way that has kind of really energized this team and made them just seem better. So I think that's a really interesting thing to take a look at. And I'm curious to see if we get more of the Chengdu Hunters finding success as the season progresses. Because this tournament cycle was pretty big for them. By getting second place, they get 2 league points. That puts them tied with the Seoul Dynasty now in terms of points going into the playoffs. So they may, even with a worse record than the Seoul Dynasty, if they finish 1 game behind the Seoul Dynasty, they have more points. Or if they finish tied with the Seoul Dynasty, they have more points. And so there's a very real possibility they could get that number 2 spot locked up, where they don't even have to play in the play-ins. And if Wrecking Ball's the meta, you have to feel pretty good about this team going forward and the way they've looked so far. I'd feel pretty good if I were a fan of the Chengdu Hunters, knowing that there's a very realistic shot you can get that spot straight into the playoffs. Gonna be one of the top teams in the league. That's a really big thing to have in your favor. And I think that is a huge sign of success for this Chengdu Hunters roster. That they were good in the May Melee. They had a bit of a rough June Joust, but they bounced back incredibly well in the Summer Showdown and got themselves some extra points. I would say there's a very high chance, so long as Wrecking Ball is in the meta, that they are another favorite to make it to the Countdown Cup. I think that they've looked very good. I think the way they integrated Jinmu back into this roster, it was basically Jinmu leave the entire. I don't know if they subbed them out at all. I know they didn't sub them out at all in the actual the top four. I don't know if they did it throughout the stage as well. Obviously, you have Jimmy on the side, who, if you need Jimmy, you can bring Jimmy in, and he's a good player, and I think that he provides a lot in that hit scan role. And we saw Terra Cookie a little bit here and there. But I think the Chengdu Hunters have looked a lot better, and I think that Monk, in particular, is a player I've had my eyes out on, or my eyes on. I think he looks really, really good. I think he is a player who's been underrated for a bit this season. I've been a big fan of him since like the first weekend that we saw him. I was beginning of the season doing more of like the draft royale fantasies. I've kind of stopped doing it, but I remember one of the weeks I saw Monk was really, really cheap, and I was like, that's an easy pick for me because Monk is an incredible player. He's looked good so far, and I think that he's finally getting some of that recognition that that he's really been deserving of the entire season because he's looked really good from the beginning. So, happy to see the success finally going Monk's way. I'm happy to see him finding a lot of success this season, and I'm very excited to see what he does going forward because I think as long as Chengdu's doing well, Monk is a big part of that. And I think Gaga played very well. I know we saw Among sub in for the final map of the Grand Finals. I don't really understand the move, but I assume it was just the type of thing where they felt like they probably needed a bit of a spark, a bit of a change. But it's weird considering the map that they won originally was Control. So it feels a little weird, but, Chengdu does Chengdu things, and, they lost because they didn't touch the point. So, it happens. But I thought Chengdu played very well. But at the end of the day, they had to go up against the best team in the Overwatch League, the Shanghai Dragons. And they are not an easy team to beat. And most people struggle against them. And that is just the nature of the way the league has gone so far. And I think that it's very interesting to look at what we have seen from the Shanghai Dragons and just how dominant they've really been this season. I mean, they have been really, really good, and they've been consistent all season. Yeah, they had a couple, blips. They lost 3-0 to the Chengdu Hunters, and they lost 3-0 to the Hangzhou Spark, and they had that one game against the Valiant where they looked like they were going to potentially lose a couple of maps. A map. But at the end of the day, they've looked really good and really consistent. And to me, with the way the Wrecking Ball compositions look, how dominant they look, they are easily the best team in the league right now. I look at it as a very clear-cut situation where they are the best team in the league. It's not like, last season we all kind of thought they were the best team in the league, but you had the Shock who, they were competing with them on a very strong level. But when they weren't playing at all, so you couldn't really tell. But this season we kind of have a very clear cut, we know what's happening, right? We're seeing these teams play against each other. I don't think the Dallas Fuel are the team that have the skills and the mindset and the means to beat the Shanghai Dragons. If a team beats the Shanghai Dragons in the Grand Finals or before the Grand Finals, it's got to be a Chengdu, a Washington, a Gladiators, a Shock, an Outlaws, a team that I think has to really grind up some of these heroes that they've shown success with in the past, or that they haven't shown as much success with the Wrecking Ball, and they just grind to get a lot better. Because right now, I don't really see this team losing this season. They've just been too good. They've been too dominant. I think they're getting better as the season progresses. I think losing Fearless and gaining Fate was better for the team because I think it opened them up to have more flexibility. I think they look more cohesive. And I just think that this team is too strong. Second team ever to win back-to-back stage titles. You could argue, the Shock with the winning of the Countdown Cup in winning stage. No, Shanghai winning the Countdown Cup last season, and then no, I'm just wrong and misremembering everything. I don't remember what team it was that someone said you could make the argument for. I think it was Shock winning the grand finals and then winning the main melee, but there was so much happening in between that I don't really count that. But yes, first team since the 2018 NYXL to win back-to-back stage championships. So it is a very, very good look from the Shanghai Dragons. I think they are a very good team. I think they look really good. And I think that they are a team that are just the favorites to win it all right now. I would say that they are the best team in the league right now. I don't know if I would say that they have the MVP of the league. I think Lip has been really good, and there's definitely a case for him. I think Leave is a very good case. I still think Fearless has a good case. Though I think Fearless is kind of a double-edged sword because I think he's both the most valuable player and the least valuable player because it's the type of thing where, like, Fearless is really good. And when Fearless can play the heroes that he's really good at, they look unstoppable. But when he can't, he's kind of a liability. And so I think the MVP race is thinning and narrowing. But it's been really interesting to watch. So I'm excited to see what happens going forward. That's it for me for today. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more like it in the future. Comment down below your thoughts on the Summer Showdown, what happened, what you took away from it, and anything in that category, in that area. I'd love to hear from you. But that is all from me once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.